B. Evans. We're going to get started with Richard D. Hall and the summary judgment that came out yesterday. This has been covered extensively in mainstream press, the narratives in mainstream press, and also the Law Society Gazette about the same disaster troll, absurd and fantastical conspiracy theories, and so on. This has been the mainstream media coverage of it. Now, just to offer a little bit of clarification here, because the BBC in particular were suggesting, it was a bit unclear in their coverage, but they were suggesting that the case was won from the litigants. And of course, this is not the end of the story. This was a summary judgment to decide whether Richard D. Hall would be allowed to present his evidence at the full hearing, which will be later in the year, I guess. So Richard tells me that he has made a complaint actually against the BBC for their coverage of this, with the full understanding, of course, that that's not going to go anywhere, but he's got to make the point anyway. So their coverage in particular, quite unclear on exactly what the situation was. So anyway, this particular, the whole case, and this action was taken by Martin Hibbert and his daughter, Eve Hibbert, and his daughter needs a litigation friend because she has brain issues following the injury that she has received. So they took this in the High Court of Justice, King's Bench Division, Media and Communications List, as I say, asking for a judgment against Richard D. Hall in order to prevent him from making his point in the main court case whenever that happens. Now, it's interesting that this came to court in February, the 8th of February. We showed a little bit of video which Ben took following the court case a couple of weeks ago. The original court case a couple of weeks ago. It took a couple of weeks for the judgment to come out. But the question was, why did it take so long for, at least the question in my mind is, why did it take so long for this litigation to happen in the first place? Because Martin Hibbert has known about what Richard D. Hall was doing and what he was saying and the publications and the talks that he was giving for 17 months or so. And yet it took that long for any kind of litigation to be brought forward. And the other point here is, of course, that this is litigation for harassment at the end of the day, and not for libel or defamation. And that's probably because of the length of time that has passed since since Richard D. Hall's initial publications, because there would be a 12-month statute of limitations on bringing a libel case and 6 years for this. So we've got to keep in mind that this litigation only began following the BBC's Disaster Trolls series. Of course, this was produced by the wonderful Mariana Spring. And this was published, I think, in October or November 2022. And so this took place, and then several months later, the litigation began. And what's interesting about this is episode 7 that you can see on screen at the minute of the Disaster Trolls series. And it was entitled, I Helped Bring Down Alex Jones. And Mariana Spring was highlighting somebody in the United States that had managed to bring the litigation against Alex Jones in the United States. And I just want to show one quote from the show notes that go with this, because it said, or it asked the question, could this sort of legal action provide a way for those targeted by similar conspiracy theories in Britain to seek accountability from their tormentors? So I don't know what has happened here. I don't know what involvement Mariana Spring or the BBC may have had in helping the Hibberts come to their decision to bring legal action. But the timing of this seems very interesting to me, and I think there are questions to be asked around it. So let's just have a look at the litigation itself and what the judge said. So we've got to remember this was action asking for a summary judgment to deny Richard D. Hall the right to present his evidence for, or at least the evidence that he has for his opinions, the reason that he came to the conclusions that he came to at the full hearing. And so the full hearing, when it happens, is going to be on the issue of whether he expressing his opinions in the way that he did constitutes harassment. But this is what the judge said in the judgment. He said, although Hall's beliefs may be genuinely held, His theory that the Manchester bombing was an operation staged by government agencies in which no one was genuinely killed or injured is absurd and fantastical. He said, once the defendant's general hypothesis has been rejected, as I have rejected it, it is unrealistic to maintain that claimants were not there and were either not severely injured at all or acquired their injuries earlier and by a different mechanism than the bombing. Indeed, the latter points are simply preposterous. And I would just make the point or ask the question, are they simply preposterous? Or is there precedent, in fact, for the UK government having staged this type of event, not necessarily in the UK, but in other countries? And I would just suggest to everybody that you have a look at Robert Stewart's fantastic website, Fabrication in BBC Panorama, Saving Syria's Children. This is his analysis of the 30th of September 2013 BBC Panorama documentary, Saving Syria's Children and Related BBC News Reports. There is no doubt in my mind that that was a staged event. And so no matter what anybody says or thinks about the Manchester Arena bombing, there is precedent, historical precedent here, and in my opinion, and therefore for the judge to suggest that there is absurdity going on suggests to me that the judge wasn't quite aware of maybe some of the other things that have gone on in the past. He ended off his judgment by saying this, that I find that the defendant has not discharged the evidential burden which rests on him. He has no real prospect, indeed no prospect at all, of success on the issues. And this is with regard to whether he's allowed to present evidence or not of his how he came to his conclusions. And I will resolve them in the claimant's favor. So that was where it ended up. Now, just to be clear, this doesn't mean that Richard D. Hall will not be allowed to provide any evidence at his court hearing whenever that happens, whenever the full court hearing happens. But it clearly means that he cannot provide justification for his actions, and therefore the only evidence that he's going to be able to give is whether, to some degree, his actions constitute harassment or not, and none of the context and none of the background will be allowed to be presented. Ben, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this, but it seems to me that if we're living in a so-called democracy with the rule of law at its heart, people have got to be able to present a case in their own defense. And if you're being prevented from presenting a large tranche of that evidence, there can't really be any justice.
Yeah, I agree. This is absolutely unprecedented. I mean, there are extraordinary claims being made here. That's certainly the case. But it feels like that Richard Hall's being preemptively denied the right to a fair trial. I think justice is being compromised here. And we're venturing into territory where people are being dissuaded and actually told that they are not allowed to question the actions and the methods and the motivations of the British state, which is extraordinarily dangerous territory for us to be venturing into.
You used the word unprecedented there, and I think that is a point we've got to make here. This is a unique case. It's the first time this type of action has been taken against any individual in the UK. And at the heart of it is the question of what is journalism, what is investigative journalism, and what is freedom of speech, and are people allowed to express opinions? Now, it's very unfortunate that if in the course of those opinions you are throwing allegations at somebody who is innocent of something, so there has to be evidence for what you're providing. As far as I'm aware, I haven't seen anything to suggest that Richard D. Hall did not have evidence for what he was suggesting. Quite the opposite, in fact. So there were definitely questions to be asked there. But the question then is, if you take this a step further, at what point are we not allowed to criticize any activity that we disagree with because we may be accused of harassment? This seems to me, Ben, to be simply an effort to have a chilling effect on independent investigative journalism, and basically the only type of journalism that's going to be allowed in the near future is that which is supported by an organization such as the BBC.
Right. It's the state defining what is and isn't true. And a phrase jumps to mind that the truth does not mind being questioned, a lie does not like being challenged. Feels relevant here.
I think that's absolutely right. Okay, so we continue to wish all the best to Richard, and we will keep everybody informed as his court case progresses. There will be a further hearing to make orders over this particular judgment, and whether that results in an order for information to be taken off the internet, that remains to be seen. But